Well, hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Red Hot and Country. My name is Anton Garcia Fernandez, coming to you from the city of Jackson in the state of Tennessee here in the United States of America. And today we have a very special interview, an interview with one of the greatest session musicians in Nashville history. He has graced countless hit records with his incomparable talent, whether you've heard him or not, and those who know music, country music or otherwise, have heard of him plenty. You'll know some of these records. I Want You by Bob Dylan, Only Daddy That'll Walk the Line by Waylon Jennings, Oh Pretty Woman by Roy Orbison, Four Strong Winds by Bobby Bare, Kiss an Angel Goodmorning and Is Anybody Going to San Antone by Charlie Pride, Blue Kentucky Girl by Loretta Lynn, and well, the list goes on and on and on. Patsy Cline, Porter Wagoner, Burl Ives, both in country music and in other styles. He founded bands such as Area Code 615 and Barefoot Jerry, and he was also the founder of Cinderella Studios in Nashville in the 1960s. An excellent guitarist was joining us on the phone today from Madison, Tennessee, Mr. Wayne Moss. Wayne, thank you so much for being here with us for an interview on Red Hot and Country.
You're quite welcome, Anton. It's good to be here.
Now, is there anybody in town, Wayne, that you have not played with?
Very so. Well, I did turn down an Elvis session once.
You turned down Elvis. How did that happen?
Well, actually, I had already quit doing sessions by then, and I didn't want to Porter and Dolly and everybody to think that Elvis was more important than they were, so I turned it down.
Well, I understand that's interesting to think that something like that could happen, because I feel like in Nashville back in the 60s and 70s, pretty much every musician wanted to play with Elvis, would do anything to play with Elvis.
Well, that's true, and in hindsight, maybe I should have gone ahead and done it, but it would look good on my resume. But I just, I didn't want to. It all pays the same, and playing on Jolene and stuff, which is as important to me as playing on Burning Love. Mm-hmm. However, we cut the demo of Burning Love out in my studio, written by Dennis Lindy, and I played bass on it. And they wanted to hire me to do the same thing, and they hired Dennis to play guitar. And but they got somewhere else to play my part, so it all turned out okay. We also cut the first record of American Trilogy with Mickey Newberry. Mm-hmm. And the arrangement that Elvis used on that was identical to the original. And so, we're still helping Elvis sell records even after he's dead. So.
And in many ways, that's how you started out. We'll talk about this a little bit, cutting a lot of different demo records. And let's go to the very beginning, though. You were born in 1938 in Charleston, West Virginia. What are your memories of your childhood there, and also your earliest musical memories?
Well, I was just a big fan of Chet Atkins, and I worked with a local group up there called the Pioneer Pals, and we were on a TV show and stuff when I was a teenager. And Charlie McCoy and Russ Hicks used to watch me on TV. They were both from West Virginia as well. And then I went from from Charleston to Wheeling, and I worked the Wheeling Jamboree for 2.5 years, and with Bill Browning and the Echo Valley Boys. Toured all over Canada and stuff, and then I came to Nashville and spent 2.5 years with Brenda Lee's band, the Casuals. And we hit every state in the Union except Maine, and almost every province in Canada. And so after that, I was getting so many sessions that I just didn't want to turn down. And so I quit the band and proceeded to do Tammy Wynette and, all these people. Mm-hmm. And that carried on for 10 or 12 years. And then we got down to the part where I had to turn down Elvis because I was trying to get my studio going. And it was going great guns, too. Late 60s and early 70s. And Linda Ronstadt cut her Silk Purse album out here, and I was real proud of that. And then Steve Miller Band part of his anthology album was done out here. Steve Miller 5. And anyway, it's just well, the combination of things that had transpired over the years. When I first came to Nashville, there were 3 working studios here. Columbia, RCA, and Phillips. And all 3 of those are either now a tourist attraction, office space, or a parking lot. So based on that, I have the oldest working studio in Nashville because we never shut the doors. We just kept going. And that's a lot of factors come into play on that. Part of it is we're in a residential area and the rent's not that high. And the other people are downtown and they're not working enough to keep the doors open. So they turn it into a tourist attraction. And so we don't have that problem, so we just keep rocking. We've had clients in here from Japan and Norway and France, Italy, and, we just keep going. And it's been a pleasure. I've been working at it now for a lot of years, but I'm pretty much retired at this point. I've got 2 or 3 good engineers, and my lovely wife Dee is running the studio for me. So I don't even have to mess with that much anymore. We just take care of the publishing company and things like that. And, there's a lot of feathers in my cap over the years. When I was 15, my mother took me and brought me to Nashville to play for Chet and said, "Isn't he great?" And Chet said, "No, he's average." And she said, "Well, what do you think you ought to do in life?" And he said, "If I had to do over, I'd get in another line of work. There's too many headaches and heartaches in the music business." And I know that for a fact. I've been through a few wives and stuff since then. But I've got me a good one now. So anyway, Chet and I wrote 2 or 3 songs together, and I got one of them in my publishing company. So that turned out all right. I ended up doing most of the RCA sessions in Nashville after Chet and I got to be good buddies. And, we played on Abilene and George Hamilton the Fourth. And George Beverly Shea, whoever came in the door, Jerry Reed, Floyd Kramer, and Only Daddy Walks the Line, like you said. And it was funny on that session, me and Jerry Reed were both on it. And I wanted him to play the solo, and he wanted me to play the solo. So we argued for a while, and Chet said, "Come on, let's cut it." And I said, "Well, I'll flip a coin, and you call it." And he called it, and I lost. So I played the solo, and I said, "Chet, is that what you had in mind?" He said, "No, that's good enough. Let's go to the next song." So it's hard to get a compliment out of Chet, but anyway, I think he was pleased. And I know the world was, because I've been getting compliments ever since.
You are, Wayne, proficient on several instruments, but how did you originally gravitate towards the guitar?
Well, my mother wanted me to play piano and bought me one and stuff. And I had piano lessons on Saturday when everybody else was watching movies at the rec center, and I didn't care for it. And so I just kind of rebelled, and my dad finally bought me a guitar for $6 at a pawn shop. And that's what I've been playing ever since. I played a little bass. On top of that, I played on my first bass session was Choking Kind. And I kind of played lead bass on that. It was a Harlan Howard song, and that was Joe Simon. And but I played banjo on down at Papa Joe's, and I played guitar on Little GTO, and various kinds of stuff. I play a lot of gospel sessions and R&B sessions and country, and and whatever they called me for. And I played rhythm a lot on Tammy Wynette's Divorce and Stand By Your Man. I was the leader on the session on David Houston when he cut Almost Persuaded. That was a big record. And but the Pretty Woman session was a lot of fun. We had 3 guitars on there. Myself, Billy Sanford, and Jerry Kennedy. And we all played the same thing. Da, 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 da. And but we came on one at a time, and that's before there was a lot of tracks where you could overdub one guy playing the same thing. But that was like a 3-track session, I think, or 4 maybe. And so we had to hire enough players to make up for the fact that we didn't have 24 tracks. But my studio out here in Cinderella, like I said, got started in 1961. And we started off with a 2-track machine and went to 3 and then 4 and then 8 and then 16 and then 24. Now we got Pro Tools, which is unlimited amount of tracks, So we've been having a lot of fun out here with cutting the Barefoot Jerry albums and Area Code 615. Area Code 615 came before Barefoot Jerry, and we almost won a Grammy with our second album. And we were up against Ferrante and Teicher, Henry Mancini, Boots Randolph, and Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And Area Code 615. And Blood, Sweat, and Tears won that year with Spinning Wheel. Which incidentally is not an instrumental anyway, it's a vocal, but it was in instrumental categories, what they had us down for. But we have a lot of fun doing people. And Tommy Rowe, for instance, had me on his record of Sheila. That was at RCA a long time ago, and it was a split session between him and this other fella, and the other guy ate up almost all of the session. There was 15 minutes left for Tommy to do an A and a B side. And so we cut Sheila and a B side to it in 15 minutes. And went number 1 and sold a million copies. So I named my first daughter Sheila after that. And then now Tommy was able to get all his publishing back on his songs, and he's recutting everything so he can put it out on his own label. And sure enough, he's come out to Cinderella and is doing them out here. So I'm getting to play on them for the second time. But I don't know. We have a good relationship with Charlie McCoy. He was a musical director of Hee Haw for 20-some years. And so also there's the guy that used to be the musical director of the Crook and Chase show was our piano player in the Barefoot band, Buddy Skipper. And he works out here a lot. And each one of those guys brings clients to the studio. And we kind of got a little clique going, And but I don't know, what else would you like me to tell you about?
Well, you mentioned Chet Atkins before, and I was wondering, Wayne, besides Chet Atkins, who were your musical heroes in your earliest days that made you decide that you wanted to be a professional musician? Who did you listen to on the radio that you looked up to?
Well, Merle Travis, and he was a finger picker, a thumb picker, just like Chet. Actually, Chet named his daughter Merle, so that's tell you something right there. But I listened to some Flatt and Scruggs and stuff. I had a buddy that played banjo, and he wanted me to be Lester so he could be Earl, And as soon as I discovered thumb pick and playing fingerstyle, I kind of put that behind me, and I've been playing with thumb pick ever since. My current heroes are Doyle Dykes. He's a great player, and let's say Tommy Emmanuel, who's on my latest Guitar Heroes album. and he cut a song that Chet had already recorded when I was 27 years old. I wrote that then, and Chet cut it in, and then Tommy Emmanuel heard it, and he cut it again. So it's called El Vaquero.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's a good song, and it's been cut by two of my heroes. But yeah, my latest CD is called Guitar Heroes. That's got Chet Atkins, George Benson doing one of my tunes, Jerry Reed doing one of my tunes, and see Mickey Newberry's on that one too, doing American Trilogy, and just a whole lot of folks that are, really impressed me, but Grady Martin's one of them. He showed up out here at my studio one day and said, "Okay, Moss, we're going to cut a song with just me and you." And I said, "Okay, what am I playing?" He said, "You're playing high string guitar." I said, "Okay." He said, "And bass." I said, "All right." And drums. I said, "I don't play drums." He said, "Yes, you do." So, we proceeded to do it, and then we got done. He said, "I want you to put an acre of those strings on there like you do with the fuzz tone guitar thing." So I was the string section on that too, and that's one of my favorites on there. It's my wife's favorite of the whole album. And but I did some Les Paul stuff, another one of my heroes. And when I was in high school, I used to fool around with a couple of tape recorders. I had a RCA and a Revere. And I would go back and forth between those two and add guitars on top of guitars. And I had the ability to play one of them at half speed and then speed it up and do the same thing Les Paul was doing on an 8-track machine. But anyway, I was able to play The World's Waiting for the Sunrise and things like that. So I've got a couple, 3 of those on my Guitar Heroes that I did with my ability to speed things up and sound amazing,
Now you did touch on this a little bit, but I'd like to talk a little bit more about this. When and how did you get to Nashville for the first time, and more importantly, what memories do you have of Nashville in those early days of your stay there?
Well, the very first trip to Nashville was the one when I was 15, and my mother said, "Isn't he amazing?" And said, "No, his average." And she said, "Well, what do you think he ought to do?" And all he knows is music. He said, "I don't know, lady. He looks like a make a good plumber. I got to go."
So he was not interested in really listening to you.
Not at that point. Yeah, he listened to me, but he said he wasn't that amazed. But I kept at it, and I eventually won him over. And like I said, I ended up doing all the RCA sessions because of it. Only that and what have you, And Skeeter Davis, just whoever was on RCA. And so we got to be good buddies. But when I first got to Nashville in 1959, there was, that was one of the years that Nashville was really coming into prominence, cutting not only country stuff, but pop things. And so I was able to slide into the Nashville A-Team Society, and we was on our way into recording with Connie Francis or whoever, came here to cut a country album. I ended up being leader on the Nancy Sinatra session at RCA. That was quite an experience. And her producer wasn't very much fun to work for. He said, "I don't want you guys to feel intimidated just because this is Frank's daughter." And you don't know how bad I want to say, "Frank who?" but I didn't. But anyway, he said, just play the same thing you play with any other dumb country chick that comes through here. So, okay, we got through it and got a good album. That was after, her Boots Are Made for Walking and stuff time. And she hadn't been back since. But there's a whole lot of things going on there. Charlie McCoy had, over the years, back in the 60s, we had an R&B band called the Escorts. Mm-hmm. And the Escorts are actually who was on Blonde on Blonde. Mm-hmm. That trombone on Everybody Must Get Stoned is Wayne Butler. He's a trombone player. And our saxophone player was on there, Whitman Dennis. Piano player, Bill Likens. And drummer was Kenny Buttrey. And, of course, Charlie and myself. And that's pretty much the rhythm section for Blonde on Blonde. Blonde on Blonde ended up being one of Billboard magazine's greatest albums of all times. And one of the songs on it is I Want You. And if you click on Bob Dylan, I Want You instrumental version, that's me playing da-da-da-da-da-da. Mm-hmm. And Sony decided to put that out as a single, I guess. They didn't pay me any royalties or ask my permission. They just decided to do it. But that's the way the music business works.
When my father is a huge Bob Dylan fan, really a big fan of Dylan's, and so I remember that the first song by Bob Dylan I ever heard on a cassette tape that my dad had, and probably still has, was "I Want You." So.
Oh really?
Oh yeah, that's the song that really got me turned on to the music of Bob Dylan. So one thing that I was thinking about. Bob Dylan was at that point not a country artist, even though his music was informed in a way by country music. And in the mid '60s, he decided to come down to Nashville to record a few albums, among them Blonde on Blonde. What do you remember about those sessions? About working with Bob Dylan? Did you help? Working on some of the arrangements? What are your memories of those specific sessions for Blonde on Blonde?
Well, as far as arrangements go, if you think about it real hard, Bob Dylan kind of talks and grunts the words mm-hmm. to it, and to a certain specific chord pattern. But da 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 is something I came up with. Mm-hmm. So that's the arrangement, and I probably should have copyright on that and then sued someone. But anyway, it would say, "What do you want me to play on this?" He'd say, "I don't know, whatever you think." So he didn't have much input. It's just just do whatever you feel. And of course, he bragged on us after that. Said that's the closest thing to what he ever heard in his head. Mm-hmm. And but that's. He was quite a departure from what we were used to. We generally cut 4 songs in 3 hours in a 3-hour session. And in his case, they booked a 2, 6, and 10. He showed up at 6, so we could tell right off it wasn't in a big rush to get it done. And we cut Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands. He said, "I got to go work on one line in the song. Y'all take a break." That was at 6 o'clock, and at 8:30 the next morning, we finally were able to cut Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands. All those times we were signing the card every 3 hours. So it cost him dearly, and but that was fine to pay the rent. We were happy to have it. But when he came in to do his next album,
the
Nashville
Nashville Skyline album. That's right.
He decided that he didn't need me on that, so I got fired off the tail end of Blonde on Blonde because I got bored and started writing my own songs. I sitting over in the corner with a gut string, but that kind of ticked him off, I think. But he was a pleasure to work with. Other than that, and a couple of his songs I'm really fond of, and that came in later years. But when I first got called for the session, Charlie McCoy said, "We got a session in Columbia, And I said, "Who is it?" He said, "Bob Dylan." I said, "Who's Bob Dylan?" He said, "I don't know. He wrote 'Blowing in the Wind.' Just show up." And so "Blowing in the Wind" is the only thing I knew him by when he walked in the door. So a lot of times since then, people would say, "Well, how was that playing with Dylan?" Just like would it be anybody else you didn't know,
Mm-hmm.
So it turned out to be a big record for him. And once he came to Nashville, all of a sudden, here comes Joan Baez,
Mm-hmm.
and all these other people.
Would you Wayne think that, or would you say that the popularity of rock and roll, starting in like 1956, 1957, did that hurt country music, or do you think that helped country music along the way?
I think it helped it because I think today's country is 1956 rock and roll, basically, with pyrotechnics and a few other things, But it's closer to rock and roll than country now. I mean, country is Loretta Lynn, Ernest Tubb and stuff, but that's not what country sounds like today.
Well, I was thinking that when Elvis Presley hit, of course, one of the ingredients to his music was country music, and of course, African American music and gospel and all that put together, and that's really what created rock and roll. But the country element was always there, and all of a sudden, comes what was known as the Nashville Sound, which was hailed a little bit as a response to rock and roll. Were you aware of such a thing called the Nashville Sound in those days when you got to Nashville?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there's two or three things Chet Atkins' version of country music of the Nashville Sound was like Eddie Arnold with the Icarus strings and horns and all this stuff. I played on those too.
Mm-hmm.
Like "Make the World Go Away" and all those.
Eddie Arnold song, yeah.
Yeah. And I remember, I don't read music very well, so I remember when we cut one of those songs, they had written out something for me to play on "What's He Doing in My World?"
Mm-hmm.
And I had asked the arranger, I said, "What does it say?" And he says, "Da da 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 da." I said, "Okay, I can play that." I did. But along in there somewhere, we created the Nashville number system, Charlie McCoy and I, and it's become the world standard now for session players. Mm-hmm. It makes it a whole lot easier to notate a song, about the progression of a song. And if they want to change keys, it's okay. Everything's still 1-4-5.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, when you first got to Nashville, it looks to me like Chet Atkins helped you quite a bit along the way, and I wonder how difficult it was for you to get into a situation where you started working recording sessions in Nashville. Was that a difficult process? Did it take a long time, or did not?
Well, most everybody that tries to break in started doing demos,
mm-hmm.
and that's what I did. And it's like I was doing a demo session one day when the guy walked in that cut Sheila, and said, "I want you on my session if I ever get a deal." And so he got a deal, and Tommy Rowe, and so they hired me. Mm-hmm. And then I was working with a group, the Escorts, and the bass player's name was Snuffy, and his singing buddy was a guy named Kent Westbury. Mm-hmm. And they said, "I want you on our session," and that was for MGM. That was the first master session I did. And we cut a song called "Bye Bye Buddy" that was kind of like Everly Brothers sang. And they said, "We want Wayne Moss to play guitar." And they said, "Who's Wayne Moss?" "We got Grady Martin and all these people." "Well, no, we want Wayne." So things like that help you break in,
Mm-hmm. What do you remember? You've talked a little bit about what it was like working the sessions with Dylan, and how those sessions were in many ways different from the standard sessions. What do you remember about the standard sessions in Nashville in the early 60s to the mid 60s? You know, when you started playing those sessions, what did they look like? It looks like there was a time constraint all the time.
There was time constraint on everybody except Dylan.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, we do 4 songs in 3 hours. That's the maximum you can cut in 3 hours for the union rules. But Dylan just, it was like, you know, whatever it takes to get it done. Most of that was, the fact that he wasn't ready, we were. And so, you know, we get the chord pattern down and stuff like that and go play ping pong. And then he'd work on lyrics and then we come in and cut it. So that's how it come. Da 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 was already in my head before the tape was rolling.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, the most everybody else, like behind closed doors,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of those sessions had some really good players on it at Columbia Studios, and let's see, I don't know, I'm trying to think of Trini Lopez and
Mm-hmm.
just a lot of folks. Once you get hot, everybody wants to hire you, you know. So Bobby Vinton and like you said, Burl Ives. I played on Silver and Gold,
Mm-hmm.
and some of those, I hear those every Christmas when it comes around, but we're supposed to get paid for that, but I never did.
Yeah, Burl Ives has always been one of my favorites, and when I used to host the radio show on WRVU all those years ago in Nashville, I used to play his music quite a bit. Not just the country music stuff, but also the folk stuff that he did before that. He was a really great singer. On those non-Dylan sessions, when you were working with people like Patsy Cline, like Skeeter Davis, and several others, were the arrangements sort of handed down to you, or did you work them in the studio while you were there?
Well, it depends. Eddie Arnold, the arrangements were done, like I said,
Mm-hmm.
and not complicated arrangements. Most of it just play what you feel, and but for the most part, it was just everybody knows what to play. If you hire the right people and they all work together all the time, it becomes kind of a cookie cutter type deal. And so we, recorded with Johnny Wright and Kitty Wells, and the Beatles came in. Ringo Starr came in one time. Charlie McCoy played with him, and he asked him who his favorite country artist was. He said Kitty Wells.
Oh.
So.
Well, out of the Beatles, Ringo Starr was the one who was the most interested in country music. He recorded with the Beatles some songs that were country sounding, and some of them were actually country songs, like Act Naturally by Buck Owens, well written, not by Buck, but by Johnny Russell. But yeah, definitely Ringo Starr did come to town later on to record an all-out country album called Bocuse Blues.
Yeah. Yeah, that was done downtown. I wish it had come out here, but they didn't know we existed. We're not even in a phone book, so that might be one of the reasons.
Now, you did mention, though, that in those early years when you got to Nashville for the first time, you were, of course, doing sessions, but you also went on the road with artists like Brenda Lee. What do you remember about going on the road? Was that something that you did during the week and then came back to Nashville for the weekend, or how was that laid out?
Well, they sort of conflicted with each other, and that's why I had to eventually quit. But yeah, we traveled a lot. We were kind of raised her, and she liked to play country fairs and things like that, and she'd say, "Let's get on the roller coaster," and I'd do that with her and stuff, and ride all these little kiddie rides. She got a big kick out of that. But there was like 6 of us, and we would take turns sort of babysitting her while, between shows. And well, she was very young at the time, and and she cut one of my songs. I didn't play on it, but "You Keep Coming Back to Me"
Mm-hmm.
is the B-side of "Coming On Strong,"
Mm-hmm.
which was a huge record, and they still owe me money on that. So, welcome to the music business.
Was it just with Brenda Lee that you went out on the road, or did you go out on the road with other artists around that time?
Well, we went with Charlie McCoy and the Escorts. We did a lot of traveling and stuff. We booked backed up people on the road. One of them was Roy Orbison, and but Freddie Cannon and
Mm-hmm.
different people would be on the show with us, and we back them up. But some of them recorded Johnny Tillotson. We cut with him and did a gig or two, but he was on the same label as Charlie McCoy,
Mm-hmm.
which was owned by was the musical director for the radio show. I'm trying to think of the name of it, but it was.
You mean the Ozark Jubilee, or
No, it was a radio show that the musical director of it owned Cadence Records, and my wife will help me with that. What was Archie Blier's his name?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
And so Archie Blier did the Everly Brothers, and he hired me for that. And he also recorded Charlie McCoy and the Escorts.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was a lot of fun to work with. He always knew what a hit was before he ever put it out. And he even came to our nightclub. We had a little nightclub called The Sack.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "You guys need a piano bad. That piano's horrible." And he bought us a Steinway upright for our club. But he brought Tillotson out there and stuff. And, we'd record with him all day, and he'd come to the club and see how the teenagers liked his new song. So we got some big acts that way. And so Ray Stevens came one day, and different ones. And finally, we closed up the Sack, and I took all the burlap out of it and came out here and put it in my studio, and that's how we used it for sound purposes. But basically, that band is what's on Blonde on Blonde,
Mm-hmm.
with a few additions. There's some people overdubbed on it. Pig, and a few Henry Strzelecki maybe. But other than that, it's Charlie McCoy and the Escorts.
Mm-hmm.
And during that period of time, we were cutting R&B songs that we had written and stuff out here at Cinderella. And that just came out on a Bear Family album out of Germany. It's got about 28 cuts on it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some good tunes in there.
You mentioned the Cinderella studio, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the establishment of that Cinderella Sound Studio. How did that come about, Wayne, and why did you decide to open your own independent studio?
Well, my mother asked me back in the plumber days what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I said, I don't know. I said, yes, I want to go to Nashville and have a studio and make records like Chet. So she said, okay. So she started writing letters to Chet, everybody she could think of, to get me interviews. And she actually divorced my dad and married a childhood sweetheart of hers who lived in Nashville. And I'm talking to you from his house right now.
Oh.
So they got married, and it had a two-car garage in it, and that became Cinderella Studio. So my mother's been a big help to me over the years, and she died when I was like 21. But I got a book out that explains all that, called Nashville Cats, The Wayne Moss Story.
Mm-hmm. And that is a book that I definitely would like to recommend to anybody out there who's interested in this topic and in the development of music in Nashville, and in this topic also that we're talking about, the Cinderella Sound Studio. Was it a difficult process, Wayne, to set up the studio, to get it established? Because I suppose that back in those days, probably now as well, there would have been a lot of competition.
There was a lot of competition, but I always undercut them on price. And that's how we got people in here like Fair and Young and stuff to begin with. And so that helped. But it got to the point where we were doing about as much sessions as they were in town, and our overhead was a whole lot less. So I had, some property around the studio that I was afraid the music would keep me awake at night, so I bought the property so nobody would complain. Now that's a couple of rental houses and a vacant lot. Mm-hmm. So nobody can complain anymore. And if they do, I'll get a different renter. So, I think I kind of thought it through pretty much from the beginning, and it's worked out pretty well.
You mentioned Fair and Young, and I must tell you, Fair and Young was the first country singer I ever heard in my life. And I was probably,
really?
I was probably about 10 or 11. And I heard his version of Don Gibson's Sweet Dreams of You. And and that's what got me turned on to country music right there. And I've been listening to country music and other styles, of course, but country music ever since. And it was basically because of that wonderful record and several others by Farron that I was able to track down later on. Do you remember any of the songs that Farron recorded at your studio? Do you have any memories of Farron, who was supposed to be a fairly interesting character?
Well, he was quite a character. It was hard for him to get through a show without coming out with a few cuss words. And, of course, at that time we were cutting on a 2-track tape, and the engineer had to go back with a razor blade and cut out all the cuss words. So I have a whole reel now of Farron 4-letter cuss words. But it was quite an experience. He'd bring in Merle Kilgore or whoever had a hit record out at the time, and he'd say, well, Merle, how's it been going? And he said, well, I've been kind of tired walking up that mountain. They say don't go on over to the mountain. And he'd go all the way through it. And he got down to the end of it, and he said, I'm going up that mountain. I ain't afraid of fucking flowers. Wait a minute, you can't say that on the record. So we had to go back, cut that out, start over. And anyway, it was a lot of fun. He had Johnny Darrell playing bass, mm-hmm. and a bunch of good musicians. And let's see, I was trying to think on steel who he had. Anyway, it was one of the Nashville Cats in that exhibit that had at the Hall of Fame. I can't think of his name.
Lloyd Green or?
No, Lloyd's been doing a bunch of sessions out here lately, and but it wasn't him.
Was it maybe Buddy Emmons or?
No, Buddy Emmons did cut his Black Album out here. That was Ben Keith is the guy I was talking about.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Big Ben. But that Black Album is the steel player's Bible. Mm-hmm. If you ever ask anybody who's the greatest steel player that ever lived, they're going to tell you Buddy Emmons. And I engineered that. So.
And in fact, Buddy did record some jazz albums as well, not just country albums. He did make some interesting jazz music as well as Hank Garland did. I have some records by Hank Garland where he's basically just playing jazz and sounds so.
Yeah, well, Hank was a jazz player, but the Black Album has got Green Sleeves and a whole bunch of pop songs on it. They're not country at all. Mm-hmm. And Danny Boy, mm-hmm. And so he just, he went way ahead of what most steel players were playing at that time.
Well, I got just a couple more questions for you, Wen, because I don't want to take too much of your time. But I have a record here that I love country music, but I like other styles too, and one of them is precisely jazz. And I have an album here by Kay Winding called Modern Country, which was released on Verve Records back in 1964, and your name is on that album. Do you remember anything of recording with Kay Winding, and how big of an influence was jazz on your playing?
Well, I'm a big fan of Johnny Smith,
Hmm.
and a few people like that. I'm not a huge jazz freak, but because there's not that much of it to be asked for in Nashville,
Hmm.
everybody either wants to call it rock and roll or country. So that's what I've been concentrating on. But over the years, I've done a few sessions that would lean in that direction, but even more so in the gospel or R&B or
Hmm.
things other than country.
And you also have founded those two bands you mentioned before, Area Code 615 and Barefoot Jerry. You were mentioning that with Barefoot Jerry, you played a show in the 70s with Charlie Daniels at UT Martin, where I teach Spanish. Can you tell me a little bit about those bands? How did the forming of your own band come about? What kind of activities did you do with these bands?
Well, we played places like Martin and so on, and we traveled around a twin-engine Navajo and went all the way into Canada and all over the United States with Charlie McCoy and the Escorts, and also with Barefoot Jerry. But Area Code 615 came before Barefoot Jerry, and like I said, we got nominated for a Grammy and all that.
Hmm.
And when the label dropped us after two albums, I asked the guys, how many of you fellas want to continue this recording thing? And so Matt Gaden and Charlie McCoy and Kenneth Buttrey said, yeah, you can count me in. And that was the beginning of Barefoot Jerry. We now got about 7, 8 albums out that we've done for people like Capitol was our first label, Warner Brothers was second, Monument was our third, and Pumpkin is, which is my label,
Hmm.
is what we're on now. So we're going to have one more album coming out, Barefoot 8, and it'll hopefully be out in the next year or so. I've been working on that for 3 years. But it's a composite of, Lloyd Green gave us one song to put on there. It's just him and a rhythm guitar. It's a beautiful song. And Charlie gave us one called Downsize. It's going to be on there. It's real funny. And Johnny Mack, a good guitar player buddy that is in the Barefoot band now, does most of the singing and playing tremendous guitar. He's got 2 or 3 songs on there, and we've got 2 songs that came from a guy in England that they wrote that are really good. Barry G's his name, and he's dead now, but his songs will live on. And let's see, I sang "Wayfarer and Stranger" on it,
Hmm.
and "One Woman's All I Need" with a horn section. So it's going to be a great album, but it's taken me a long time to get sure I'm happy with the mixes and all those things. So I'm trying to be picky.
What was the idea behind these bands? Was it just to have fun with your friends? Was it a way to make some extra money? Because I suppose you were very busy with session work.
Yeah, and we'd do sessions all day and go out and play at night or on the weekends. And it was a little more loose, than a regimented session. So we were just basically to have fun, like you said. But Charlie Daniels came out and cut his whiskey album at Cinderella. And so, we've been buddies for a lot of years. And but I've outlived most of them, Charlie Daniels included. I'm 84 now. and still rocking.
And I definitely do appreciate your rocking and your chatting with me this morning. I am wondering, one thing that I find interesting is years ago when I got the chance to interview in Nashville, the late Billy Walker,
Yeah,
from the Tall Texan.
yeah, I go with
Um,
him too.
he told me that when he was making all those records, Cross the Brasses of Waco and Circumstances and Charlie's Shoes and all those songs, uh, all he was trying to do was to make a buck, to make ends meet, and he never thought that the music would have the lasting power that it actually did. So that decades later, people were still talking and are still talking and listening to these records. Did you have any sense that what you were making in those days in the 60s and the 70s was long lasting music that would endure the test of time, or would you agree with what Billy Walker stated on that show?
Yeah, I didn't have any idea at the time. There's times like on Pretty Woman, I knew that was going to be a smash, and so did everybody on the session. But we didn't. We learned later that even besides the artists making money, they would have to pay us again if they used it in a movie or if they
Mm-hmm.
And so that's reared its head several times, like Pretty Woman and let's see, that Abilene was in a song called "A Perfect World," and Dumb and Dumber had a song in it that just paying off like a slut machine, and so it's really nice to be able to get paid twice. As a matter of fact, the union says they're going to make Sony pay up for that "I Want You" instrumental. They're going to pay everybody on the session again. So that'd be great.
You mentioned before, Wayne, the A-Team in Nashville and the Nashville Cats, and in fact, your book is called Nashville Cat. All those great session players that all came together in Nashville in those days. And one thing that I've always wondered, and I don't know if you have any insight into this, but you might, was there back in those days really a sense of community, of there being a group of musicians with whom you shared things in common and with whom you played, or is that something that was said retrospectively? Like, were you aware of being part of a clique, of being part of a group of musicians that all had a lot of different things in common, or was that something that was fabricated later on by the historians?
It's later on, but when I first got here, there was 9 people doing all the sessions, and Floyd Kramer and Buddy Harmon, Bob Moore, and Grady Martin, and I had a hard time winning over everybody's favor to be in the studio, and with them, and I finally did, and I was real nice to all of them, and Ray Eddington and I went fishing a lot, and Grady Martin, and so we got to be big buddies. And Ray's in his 90s now, and Pig just died a while back, and he and I were born in 1938, so they had a memorial for him at the Hall of Fame the other day. But there was kind of a clique of 9 people, like I said, when I got here. And one day I was at Columbia, and I was sitting in Grady Martin's chair, and he walked in about half drunk and said, "Who told you could sit in my chair?" So I had that to overcome. But I finally did, and we got to be good friends. And he came cut at my studio, like I said, and he's on my Guitar Heroes album. So as time marched on, then it became the A-Team, and the notoriety of those people, along with about 15, 20 others, became the Nashville Cats. And, Ben Keith and everybody else. So, but every single member of Area Code 615 is a Nashville Cat. There's 9 of them. Norbert Putnam and David Briggs, and, Kenneth Buttrey, Charlie McCoy, me, Buddy Spiker.
Great fiddle player.
Bobby Thompson. And so we were all in there except Matt Gaden, and he wrote Everlasting Love. And I called up the people that do it. And I said, you guys realize you left one guy out, that's Matt Gaden. And they said, okay, we'll jump right on that. And so they did. So I kind of feel like I'm running the music business.
On a personal level, Wayne, how satisfying would you say the line of work that you have chosen has been over the years? How hard of a life has it been, or has it been a satisfying life overall?
Well, yes and no. It's very satisfying. I'm very happy. However, Chet said too many heartaches and headaches. And he's right. And I smoked a whole lot of cigarettes on the Tammy Wynette sessions and developed COPD. And so I'm having breathing problems now as a result of it. So that's part of those headaches.
My last question will be, I believe, maybe one of the hardest. Are there any specific records that you remember especially that you have fonder memories of having made over the years? We've mentioned several of them, but are there any? It doesn't have to be one, two, three. Are there any that you remember in a special way?
Well, I really enjoyed Pretty Woman, of course. Everybody in the studio knew that was a hit before we walked out of there. But I enjoyed the Tammy Wynette sessions and Eddie Arnold. I played on nearly all of his stuff, and I just it's been a joy to make my childhood dreams come true, of coming to Nashville and having a recording studio, which now is the oldest one in Nashville, and still working. And I'm playing guitar. And so I'm pretty happy that I made my dreams come true.
And we are happy and lucky about that as well as listeners. I tell you, I've enjoyed your music, whether I knew it or not. And pretty early on, I knew it because I was interested in knowing who was playing on what session. And, the CD sleeves and the record sleeves did include that information, and that's how I first became aware of your name.
That changed when Bob Dylan came to town. And so we were on the liner notes of that, and that's the first time anybody ever knew who was on anything. And that sort of shamed all the record labels into doing the same thing. So now they tell you who was playing on it. So, but incidentally, if any of your listeners would like any of this product we've been talking about, Area Code, Barefoot Jerry, Charlie McCoy and the Escorts, whatever, they need to go to barefootjerry.com, and you'll find all the things for sale.
That was going to be my final question. If people want to find any of these records, if people want to know more about Wayne Moss, where do they have to go? Would you repeat that?
Barefootjerry.com.
And you mentioned there's
Wayne at barefootjerry.com.
You mentioned there's a book as well.
Yeah, there's the books. We got T-shirts and all kind of stuff. And the book's on Kindle now for folks on Amazon if they want to read it that way.
And the book again is called Nashville Cat: The Wayne Moss Story. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Yes.
Well, Mr. Moss, it really has been a pleasure to get a chance to talk to you this morning. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your memories, as I am sure that everybody out there does as well. It's been a pleasure for me to talk to you this morning, and I wish you the best of luck with anything that you do in the future with your Cinderella Sound Studio, which is the oldest in Nashville that's still going on right now and going strong. And I appreciate your time, and thank you so much for being a guest on Red Hot and Country today.
Quite welcome.
This has been a new episode of Red Hot and Country. My name is Anton Garcia Fernandez, talking to you from Jackson in the state of Tennessee. And our guest today has been guitarist, guitar great Wayne Moss, who joined us from the town of Madison, Tennessee, on the phone for some very interesting, at least it was extremely interesting conversation to me. Very soon you'll be able to listen to this podcast on my YouTube channel, Anton GF. And remember what Chris Christopherson once said, if it sounds country, that's what it is. Don't think about it anymore. Thanks a lot, and so long, everybody.